to the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast with your hosts, Kyle Borganoni and Matthew Betz.
Welcome in, one and all, to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I am joined on this wonderful day by Matthew Big Booty Blowout Betz.
Oh, man, when you said the words big booty to start the show here, I was a little concerned what you were going to say there. What people are probably wondering is, what the heck are you talking about, Kyle? Yeah, dude, yesterday, I mean, is there anything more hashtag dad life than a massive blowout from your newborn in their car seat? Now I know the answer is no.
Now, just for those at home, those without kids, or those that, I mean, I know we're in audio format, but need just, a little bit more of a visual. When we say blowout, what are you talking about here?
Oh my gosh, dude. I mean, we are talking about a crime scene. I mean, this was so far off the back. Like, truthfully asking yourself, how is this physically possible? Also, this is our smaller of the two daughters. So how this even happened with her is truly impressive. I was very impressed with what happened. Also, the car seat about 50% covered, which, I'm going to have to take the whole thing off and we're going to put it back on. It's already been washed, but I was telling you before we started recording, like, I'm already dreading that process because I know it is going to take probably 2 hours to get that thing back on, because getting it off was at least a half hour and there were multiple YouTube videos watched. So if anyone needs me tonight, I will be probably putting the car seat back on and cursing left and right.
Dude, this is dad life. But what also you have is you have some fresh content for when your child graduates later on. I'm talking like their high school graduation party. You get to play back this clip right now of us. Obviously, it's going to be an audio format, but you get to tell them, like, hey, there are thousands and thousands of listeners all around the world that got to hear about you just dumping your pants.
I'll make sure I play it at her graduation party. It should be great.
No, this is really good. We are towards the end of the summer here, and we're still talking best ball. Today we're going to do a best ball mailbag.
Dude, it's middle of July.
Dude, I feel it with
it's not
kids
the end of summer.
With kids that are about to be back in school. I feel it, and I know you're just. I think this is what it is for you, Betz. Every day feels the same when you're getting 3 hours of sleep.
Dude, 100%.
For those of us out there in the real world, not in this crazy baby bubble that you're in, it is actually almost time for school to start back, and we're heading towards August. We're heading towards September. We wanted to kind of take everything we've done in best ball and wrap it up into some mailbag questions. We're even going to throw in some AMA type questions that people asked. So if you have a question, you can reach out on Twitter. Betz is at the Fantasy PT. I'm at Kyle_Borg, and we give special preference. All right, there is some nepotism here with our best ball children. We definitely would give that preference to our Discord members. So if you want to get on the Fantasy Footballers Discord, there's a best ball channel that is still hopping. I still see people all the time asking questions, posting lineups. And the best part about best ball is you have up until September to be able to keep playing this thing. And we would say August is probably a prime time. So quickly explain for listeners why, if you're drafting right now, it's the dead of summer, but why is it beneficial for people to draft in August and even early September?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is a time of year that more casual people will start to come back into fantasy football world. And if you've been listening to the show in, April, May, June, I mean, you are one of the few that are just obsessed with this game as we are. And so welcome to our team. But you're going to be ahead of the curve. And so people are coming back in, jumping in with some really stale ADP. You'll be able to pick off some bad spots for players. And I think at the same time too, there's always this debate. Do you draft early? Do you draft late? You can draft in July, and then Cam Akers tears his Achilles last year. But, in August, if you're playing in Best Ball Mania, there were teams that had Darrell Henderson from, I don't even know, round 12, 13, 14, something like that last year, that now people are taking him in round 4. And so, if you already had Darrell Henderson, you're not taking him again in August because you already have excellent value ahead of the curve. So if you're playing in these tournaments, I love to do that kind of approach where I took certain players early, now I take them later, and so much changes. And so we should be willing to adapt our strategy and adapt the players we have exposure to as we get more information, which when training camps get here, we'll have a lot more.
You also get to learn from some of your mistakes, player mistakes, evaluation, roster construction. And that's going to be our quick question before we get into the mailbag. What are some of the biggest best ball mistakes you've seen in drafts? And I know you and I have never made any of those at all. I was in a draft with Jason.
Shout out to Devin Duvernay.
Dude, I've definitely made way too many of those. I have done one with Jason where we had both of our quarterbacks same bye week. We had to take a third quarterback at the end. We didn't want to, and that third quarterback was Carson Wentz. So that was painful. I mean, the thing we talk about a lot in terms of mistakes is people taking players way ahead of ADP to complete a stack. And I would say I'm guilty of this. I did this the other day where I just really wanted to get Cole Kmet, and I had Justin Fields. So, I was 14 picks ahead of ADP. Now, I have the conviction, and I have in my rankings, that Cole Kmet is the tight end 10. So I'm totally fine taking him ahead of guys like Gesicki, Alberto, Pat Freiermuth. Like, to me, that's not a big deal, but it does still matter in terms of value. I didn't think he would come back, but taking players ahead of ADP is one of the bigger mistakes. But what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I'll real quick hit on something we talked about, I feel like at least 5 or 6 times on the show, but it's just, we draft as if we're right. And if you draft as if you're correct, your roster construction should reflect that. So if you start RB, I mean, you're counting on those 2 running backs. Let's say you went, I don't know, give me a good example, Kyle, like Christian McCaffrey, and then in round 2, you took Leonard Fournette right at the turn. Like, if you took those 2 running backs to start, you're, in theory, counting on those 2 scores almost every week. If one of those guys gets injured, you're done anyway. And so you shouldn't be drafting for safety and taking like 6 running backs, 7 running backs in those sort of builds. You should be probably taking 5, somewhere around there. And I think I've seen a lot of that too. Same thing with wide receivers. If you start with 2 or 3 elite ones right off the bat, you're counting on those guys. So why are you burning wide receiver draft picks in rounds 11, 12, 13, where you're just hoping these guys carve out a role, like that kind of thing? So I would just say make sure you're drafting as if you're correct. Don't take too many of one position, especially if you take that, position early in your draft.
Yeah, and I've found it's a mistake where if you go all in and say, I'm going to take a bunch of wide receivers, and the rest of your draft kind of zigs while you zagged, then you're going to find in the later rounds there's going to be wide receivers sitting there in terms of ADP, and it's really tempting to say, hey, there's all these wide receivers I can keep, but your build dictates that you needed to take, running backs in those, rounds 8 to 10. So you really have to think long term. I would encourage people, that draft board you get on Underdog, look at that whole thing. Don't just look at the next ADP. And I'll add this in as a big mistake. It's not identifying archetypes for certain positions. So we care about, when we construct our rosters, are there certain archetypes that allow players to hit a ceiling outcome? So for instance, at quarterback, if you only have pocket passers, your outcome to find players that can actually be difference makers is really hard. So if you had a roster of just, Derek Carr and Tom Brady, I think that's a fine stack, but you're missing out in a 4-point scoring format of some of those rushing quarterbacks. So I try to have builds where if I have a pocket passer like Tom Brady, like I have a team that's Brady and Fields. Now, I bet I could find better combinations, but what I'm asking, what I'm seeing in the quarterback position is I'm identifying players that I think have enough upside at a relative cost. So I would say pairing Matt Ryan and Tom Brady is a big mistake. Like, there's not much upside with Matt Ryan, and Tom Brady, he can finish as like a top 3 quarterback, but those rushing quarterbacks just have a better outcome. So with quarterbacks, you need to do that. At running back, whenever you're shooting for the moon at the end of your draft, you need to find running backs with pass catching in their profiles. So if you go in Underdog's rankings right now, there are players like J.D. McKissick and Jerick McKinnon and Chris Evans going basically at the end of your draft, where Sony Michel needs a lot to go right for him to truly pay off when you already have a pass-catching running back there with Chase Edmonds. Same thing, like Donta Foreman in Carolina. You need Christian McCaffrey. Like, that's the reason you'd be drafting him, is you're saying the Christian McCaffrey lineup fails. So identify pass-catching running backs. That's the archetype I want to finish my draft because, how many usable weeks are you going to get out of J.D. McKissick? What do you think?
It's so tough because I feel like people think of J.D. McKissick when he had that outlier season, but I'm kind of down on McKissick as even an option this year.
Oh,
honestly.
You're Brian Robinson.
Dude, best running back ever. No, it's because Carson Wentz is terrible at throwing to running backs. Case in point, Miles Sanders wide open all the time, right over his head. But people expecting that sort of thing from McKissick, I think, are going to be disappointed. So how many usable weeks are you going to get? 3, 4, maybe?
Yeah, 3. I think you can get 3 right now. I think with Donta Foreman, it's possible he has 0 or 1. Like if there's
I would also argue too, though, it's possible he has 12. Like, what if McCaffrey has a
that's what I'm saying is
huge injury, right? Like
you're drafting based on the archetype what your team needs. If your team needs usable weeks, I'm going to take McKissick. But if your team is banking on McCaffrey going out and you're going against that McCaffrey team, especially in a big tournament, you're going to take Foreman. But just identify what the archetype is you're looking for. You can do that at wide receiver as well, late round. And then at tight end, you want to find guys that can catch 6-7 touchdowns where it's really hard. Where I don't mind Austin Hooper in terms of like a consistent floor option, but he's not going to catch 7 touchdowns.
Let's clip this and play it back in January when he has like 7 on the dot.
Dude, I have a lot of Austin Hooper. I know you basically haven't drafted him.
I don't know, man. I just could he have like 450 yards and 7 touchdowns? Of course, sure. But I don't know. It's so uninspiring, I guess, is kind of the guy that I see in Austin Hooper.
Could he have 70 catches?
In theory, yes. Likely, probably not.
We need to find an Austin Hooper. We need to have a really dumb water bet on some of these players that nobody cares about, that we have very different opinions on. And maybe let's do an article. Players that you and I feel the exact opposite about. And
we should. That'd be great, actually, because listeners always give us a hard time because we agree too much.
Yeah. No, there's a lot of players that you and I feel differently about. Amon-Ra, whoever it is, all those kind of players. So we'll get something like that out there. I did want to highlight a couple of recent articles. One that you threw out there, 25 things I learned from the Fantasy Footballers projections. It even got the Andy stamp of approval in our channel, which basically I think it was a great summation of going through the U to K, looking at all the Ultimate Draft Kit projections and saying, here are some big takeaways. You basically did a giant thread without being that guy on Twitter that did a giant thread.
Yeah, there were no thread emojis in the article, but yeah, check it out. I spent an embarrassing amount of time in the projection section of the UDK over the last week or so. And what's funny is now I know already right now who each guy is higher on because I've looked at their projections so much. But it was a really valuable experience. And I chose 25 things that stuck out to me and put a fantasy spin on all of them so that it can help us kind of identify where we want to go in our drafts, players maybe we're fading, maybe we're targeting. One that stuck out to me, like I've been kind of in on Miles Sanders at his ADP, but I also love Jalen Hurts. And I was looking at the projections and I'm like, dude, if they are correct in projecting the rushing for Jalen Hurts that he had last year and what they have this year, like Miles Sanders is screwed. And so I would not be drafting them together. That was a huge takeaway for me. And I've done that a couple times in my best ball drafts, and I will not be doing that anymore.
I've definitely done that as well. You basically need a combination of Miles Sanders to get like 5+ receiving touchdowns for that to kind of work out. But I have been taking a stance, if I don't get Hurts, I really bullish on Sanders in best ball or vice versa. Like, I think those are two players, like you mentioned, they're correlated in terms of like, okay, who's going to get the rushing touchdowns? I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to get 10 this year like he did last year. So we'll see. I love those takeaways, though, because in best ball, we can actually figure out what's some actionable info that we can use. So, yes, check that out on the website. But let's jump in the mailbag.
Mailbag.
We're going to blitzkrieg through a number of best ball related questions, a couple of AMA, and then some of them that I think kind of apply broader to fantasy and DFS in the fall. If you want to send in those questions, you can do it at the Fantasy PT for bets and at Kyle_Borg. But once again, the Discord channel is the place where people get to tag us, and I feel like I just get to respond way better. It's easy for me to keep up in threads. Twitter, it just kind of gets pushed down, and I respect that. Also, I would say if you tag one of us and we don't respond to like, please grade my lineup, if you do it in the Discord channel, you are guaranteed a response from at least one person. It's a pretty happening spot, wouldn't you say?
It's awesome, man. I loved it. I feel like that's really been something new for the brand. I mean, we've had it, but it's new as like, it's really valuable. People are in there talking strategy. Hey, what do you think about this pick? I'm on the clock in round 4. Here's my roster to start. What do you think? And so it's been great for the summer. But I also am super excited about it for DFS because there's so much that happens in between our shows and our articles, like especially Saturday night, Sunday morning. Like last year I was in there Sunday mornings, I'd hop in, grab a cup of coffee, answer a few questions. Here's the news. Here's what I think about it. So I think it's a really valuable resource, and the people in there are super smart too. So it's not just me and Kyle giving advice. It's really smart people too.
We didn't invite dumb people. It was one of the requirements.
You had to give your IQ to get in.
Yeah. No, I mean, we've looked at college transcripts, and we looked at preschool transcripts, and we basically found a good happy medium of people. And no dumb people allowed. All right. First question from Twitter is from Trey Graham. He asked, as of recording, how many best ball drafts have you done? And what's the ballpark number for how many you typically end up having? I'll let you start, Betz.
Yes, I'll be very exact with this because I went back and counted and I looked. 137 as of right now. Currently, Kyle's giving me a face. Currently in 3 slows, so we'll add to that. But usually, like last year, I think I came in around 100. Didn't do as many as I am this year. And I was thinking about why that is. And truthfully, like last summer, I was out on the golf course. I was on vacation. I was doing things. But when you have newborn twins, you are at home a lot. And so when you're chilling and you're holding a baby, I mean, nothing better than whipping out your phone doing best ball. So I plan on doing probably somewhere around the 200-ish range when it's all said and done.
Wow. I did not know this, and I think you have a problem. I really do. I'm going to report this to HR. You are drafting best ball while we are supposed to be working.
Can I give you a quick funny story?
Hold on. Let me talk to my agent. Sure.
Okay, great. I'm glad you ran that by HR first. I actually put this out on Twitter today, and I sent this to you, so I think you know where I'm going. But I was doing a draft this morning holding the same baby who had the blowout, and I'm on the clock. I have a stack set up. I've got A.J. Brown. I've also got Marquise Brown. I got the Browns.
Brown Bros.
So, the Brown Bros. And I'm waiting to see, do I want to get Kyler? Do I want to get Jalen Hurts? Sure enough, they both fall to me. And I'm like, all right, who do I want here? And I was just thinking about it. 10 seconds left on the clock. I was like, taking a lot of Jalen Hurts. Give me Kyler Murray. Not 2 seconds after I hit the draft button, she rips one of the largest farts I've heard from her in her small life. Made me laugh so hard. And that just made me so proud as an Eagles fan that we are already setting the foundation. Yes. That it's fly Eagles fly all the time over here. So just wanted to point that out there. That's what I'm doing right now when I'm drafting best ball. You guys think I'm in here with my spreadsheets and all that sort of stuff. No, I'm living the life that it's not very glorious at this point in time.
I feel like that's the reality. Like you're in a room in a best ball draft with 11 other people, and you think that everybody's just like locked in. Like half the time I'm drafting and doing something else. Like I put out a clip of us doing different stuff around the house. We did some Hot Wheels yesterday. We did the reality is the way that people are drafting is that's partially a great thing that best ball can work out that way, but also you can get really distracted and make mistakes. You're hoping other people make mistakes. I am not close to that, Betz. I'm at around 60 right now, and I'll probably end up 100, 125. And I asked myself that question, what was different? Because I think I drafted more last year. I've been playing a lot more pickleball this year.
That'll do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm remote, so obviously I'm not there for the pickle sesh. But yeah, you've got to put in hours, dude, to refine the craft and get on the court.
It really isn't a thing with HR where, we finish recording, everyone does what they're supposed to do. We're not a lazy group, but this is what we do as a company. So yeah, I would say some people are worried. They're like, I'm not going to max out. We always say, come back to what your goals are. And I would say my personal goals for best ball is this is an aid for what I get to do for redraft and what I get to do for DFS. We talked about last week how you leverage best ball in other formats. And then I want to enter a couple of high-end tournaments and let that be my team. Like I do Best Ball Mania, the Puppy 2, I got in a lot of different entries there. I love throwing out, simple $3 casual ones, 12-man tournaments, little leagues. But we'll share this now. You, me, and Jason have joined forces as a trifecta in the Great Dane tournament on Underdog. And we split the cost because it is a $1,000 entry. And I think you and I said, this is our one big team. We're doing this. We did last year the Big Dog tournament together. We split that one. This is a step up for us, but I think this is more like a company bonding experience. Is that how you take it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll be sweating this team together, which is fun. It's always fun when you have some skin in the game, not only for yourself, but someone else with you. Like last year when Debo was having these insane games, like I would text Kyle and be like, dude, the Big Dog team, Debo, like that's our boy. And it's funny because we didn't even want him on the team, but we'll have that same experience this year. We'll see how we do. We drew the 12 spot, have yet to make a pick, but we'll be sure to report back maybe on next week's show what's going on.
Yeah, and who knows? It's an 8-hour clock, so it could go super slow. But I would tell people, if you're worried about how to join a ton of different tournaments and whatnot, like find one that you can do with a friend and let that be your team. let that be the team that you guys go in together, that you guys say, like, this is somebody we can root for, because during the season, it's really hard to do that unless you co-manage a team. Next question from Twinkle Toes on Discord. How do you guys feel about the hero running back strategy in best ball? One where you draft one stud, then fade a running back for a few rounds while you draft other positions. Also, Kyle, at any point in your life, has someone called you Kyborg, as in cyborg? I'll answer that part real quickly, okay? Kyborg is one I've gotten a lot. Brooks actually calls me that all the time, Kyborg. I've gotten Borg a lot. I think that was one of the common ones. K-Borg. And then my brother, all of his friends call him Borgo. I like that too. But here, they call me the Borgogan, which isn't my favorite, but I'll take it for like a deucer name.
That's just so funny still to me. I can't wait for the Deuce Cam, by the way. You excited for that?
Dude, people are pretty hype about the Deuce Cam, and we've talked about what that looks like. We've talked about if the camera pans back and it's just like the top of our heads, so like no one can actually see what we look like, and they just see like our heads bobbing up and down. But I think the three of us back there, we're all like people that want to help, we want to contribute, but we're like, please don't put the spotlight on me. So it'll be interesting to see how that gets added in, and if we're just hideous, if people just say we don't even want to look at those people.
I mean, we'll see what the YouTube comments are, dude. People are ruthless out there.
People are mean in the YouTube streets. Let's go back to hero RB strategy real quick, though. So this strategy, let's say you get the 102 and you get Christian McCaffrey, and you're saying he's going to be the guy, or Austin Eckler, somebody else at the very beginning of your draft, Jonathan Taylor. What is your general feel? And I'm going to follow up with some stats, but like, is this something that you employ a lot when you get one of those first picks and you get a stud running back?
Yes, I love this strategy personally. Like you said, if you take one of those stud running backs, you're relying on their score, most weeks. Of course, there's going to be a week here or two where it doesn't work out for you, but you're drafting as if you're right. And so, yes, if you take Christian McCaffrey, even though he's burned us a couple years in a row, you're counting on him to be one of your two running back scores, most weeks. And so it would be silly for you to then just load up on 3 or 4 running backs out of the gate in the first 4 or 5 rounds. So yes, I love the strategy. Typically when I do go for it, I'm taking one of them in the first 2 rounds. There's a bunch that I feel comfortable with this year specifically. Like I would even extend it personally to a Saquon Barkley or a Leonard Fournette that drops a little bit. So I'm comfortable with that if you feel like the wide receivers are stronger in the middle rounds. And then from there, I'm going into my RB2 spot, looking for guys like, based off the top of my head in ADP, like Melvin Gordon, Chase Edmonds, James Cook, kind of that range is kind of where I'm looking to pull the trigger next, basically.
So I'm going to give you some numbers kind of the last couple of years about hero running back strategy and how that worked. I did pull some numbers from an article from Tom Straken from Fantasy Pros. So some great data out there if you want to Google that. But basically, the hero running back strategy, if you were to compare that to zero RB, where generally you're not taking a running back till at least the 5th round, 6th round, wherever, or the robust RB, the high T approach, where you say, I'm going to take, 2, 3 running backs, 3 running backs right off the start. It was way more successful last year in terms of advance rate for Underdog. It beat the expected advance rate of 16.6, and the average for hero running back lineups was over 20%, compared to zero RB, which wasn't great last year, and robust RB. But I think the conversation for this, when you say, does this strategy work? I think any strategy can work. I think we both agree. Like if you pick the right players, yes. That's kind of simplifying it. In 2020, so 2 years ago, it kind of depended on which early running back you decided to jump on board, right? If you did Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley, who were the first 2 picks, you were done, right? Like those squads were completely toast. If you did Zeke, he had a down year, but Alvin Kamara was the RB1. Dalvin Cook was great. Derrick Henry was unbelievable. Like in the first round, if you just said, I want to do hero RB, and you picked those guys, it was great. Last year, if you try to do hero RB, depending on where it was bad, right? Like first round running backs overall did not come through. The main guys Jonathan Taylor was awesome. Austin Eckler was kind of like a 1-2 turn, but I'm assuming most people didn't go hero RB with him. So I would say it can work, but more than anything, it just matters if your running backs hit, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I also want to point out too, like I'm not entering my draft saying this draft in particular, I'm going hero RB. Like if if I take one early and then all of a sudden in like round 5 or someone drops super far, like Breece Hall, if he's sitting there in round 5 or 6, like I'm taking Breece Hall. Like it's just an insane value. So don't necessarily get locked in based on what you want to do. If it works out and the ADPs line up for you and the value doesn't fall in a certain way where you should change, then go for it. I think there's definitely, like you said, upside to doing it, but also downside. And that's why you draft a bunch of teams and you do a bunch of different strategies, and hopefully you kind of hit the right ones when it matters to win some money.
I have a team right now that started McCaffrey at the 102, and then at the 4-5 turn, I have Breece Hall, and then I have Chase Edmonds, where I wouldn't call that a hero running back strategy because Breece Hall I saw as a value, but the way that I approach that draft when I drafted McCaffrey is he's my guy. If I get value, I will jump and get a running back, but I feel comfortable that if I'm drafting him here, he's going to be in that slot, and I'm going to use his score almost every single week. So just think about that as you're building your roster. Don't just lock into a strategy. All right, before the next question, let's take a quick break. All right, let's blaze through some more questions here. This one's from Discord from Gnome Child. Great avatar, by the way, here. Who are you taking with your last pick, a.k.a. past pick 200 in best ball? This is something we discussed on Thursday's show on Fantasy Footballers in the Underdog Best Ball segment, but throw out a couple names, bets that you like.
Yeah, for sure. A couple running backs that I've been taking, just kind of throwing a dart, and that's what you're doing here. We don't feel confident in them, but I've been targeting a little bit of Jeff Wilson recently, just before training camp, to see, like, is he actually running as the 2? Maybe he's not. Maybe those picks look silly, but if he is, his ADP will climb. So I went in on that early. I like Chris Evans. I think we feel decently confident he'd be the guy if anything happened to Joe Mixon. And then I'm also throwing a dart at Eno Benjamin right now, just to see, like, were the reports from minicamp true that he is running as the running back 2 instead of Darrell Williams? Because I took a ton of Darrell Williams early, and so I want to kind of hedge that bet. For wide receivers, I've been throwing a dart at Quez Watkins. If I take Jalen Hurts, he's a guy who would play, I think, in almost every snap if anything happened to A.J. Brown or Devonta Smith. And then Zay Jones, like, he's uninspiring, but he's going to be playing in 3 wide receiver sets for Jacksonville. And if our boy Marv, sadly, is on the decline, which I think he kind of is, if Zay Jones earns the starting job, he could be playing in 2 wide receiver sets with Trevor Lawrence. So those are the guys I've been targeting in round 18.
I feel like Marv Jones will forever be like a top 5 person in my heart. But in best,
easy.
But in best ball, I'm taking him if he falls, but I'm not like targeting like I did last year. And it definitely didn't work out last year, right?
I mean, if you took a Jaguar, it did not work out last year.
I'm trying to think if that's true.
Shout out to our boy Urban Meyer.
That's probably true. I could look back and I would Laquan Treadwell. If you took him, I bet he had a good advance rate.
Yes, because he was going around 18.
Yes. Maybe not. It wasn't super.
Or my boy.
It was usable.
Jamal Agnew.
Jamal Agnew for
Jamal
DFS.
Agnew last year. If you did, please take a screenshot. Oh, I guess you can't. It's too late. But just at me on Twitter and let me know if you did, because that would make me very happy.
That would. I'll throw out a couple names. Chris Evans, the Cincinnati running back. Terrace Marshall Jr., I'm still in. Jalen Guyton is probably one of my favorite darts to throw at the very end. He had a stretch last year. We had 3 touchdowns 3 weeks in a row, or a touchdown 3 weeks in a row. James Prochet, he is the Ravens. Could be the 2 with Devin Duvernay. I don't know. One of those 2 will. But I'm putting out an article, Best Ball Tournament Dart Throws. If you want to check that out on the site, I am extending that list if you want to give some players. All right, next question. This is from @KevinVSims on Twitter. When drafting in best ball for larger multi-entry tournaments, how necessary is it to audit and keep track of your players so you're not too concentrated? What are some of the methods to do this? In Underdog, you can see your exposure rates. If you go to your completed, you can do that. You can also download it in CSV format. So that's one way I get to look at it. But Betz, how do you kind of take the players that you've drafted and then adjust for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think about this in a couple ways, and kind of the first one is just, like, have I been drafting a lot of drafts recently and doing it in a certain way? So, like, am I drafting a ton of teams going RB in rounds 1 and 2? Well, then my exposure rate is probably pretty low to CeeDee Lamb and Stephon Diggs and, Mike Evans. And those are, you want those players and you want exposure to them because they can all be the wide receiver one this year. No one would be shocked about that. So you want to have some exposure to those kind of guys. So I think about how I've been drafting and maybe don't get locked into a certain way. And then also too, like, I don't know about you, but it just feels like for me, I have a couple guys in certain rounds that like I just gravitate to for some reason, whether it's the archetype that I like or I like just the situation or whatever it is. You know, I've been vocal. I love Ramondre Stevenson this year, but I can't always take Ramondre Stevenson where he goes because if he doesn't work out, I'm going to look silly and I have too much of him. So think about it that way. But yeah, the easiest way is if you're drafting on Underdog, they tell you right there, which I think is valuable. And I think if you think about this from a DFS lens, like there are certain weeks where we would probably hit a lock button on a player to get 100% exposure, but most weeks it's not the case. And so just think about that from that lens. You know, if you are all in on a guy and it doesn't work out, like your expected value coming back is not as good as it could be.
I sorted the other day by rookie wide receivers, and I've been very vocal about Chris Olave. He will end up being my highest exposure player. But I also gave myself a check to say, okay, which guys have I not really drafted that much? And Sky Moore was one of those players where Sky Moore could finish as the rookie wide receiver one this year. He could be the one in Kansas City. It's not likely. Like I would put my money on Juju in terms of just overall targets, but it could be Sky Moore. And so I found myself in that range when Sky Moore was going, you know, around Tyler Lockett and some of these other players. Like I just hadn't been taking him very much. And so I made a conscious decision. Hey, if he's there and I want to correlate him with some of my other teams and other combinations, like let's throw in Sky Moore. Like he could be the second half rookie wide receiver. He could be this year's Amon-Ra, right?
He could be. Yeah, for sure.
I think it's the kind of archetype of a slot wide receiver who goes off at the end of the year. He could do it. All right. Next question is from @AJ Passman, who's actually one of our new writers. So yeah, go ahead and follow him on Twitter. What is the biggest difference of opinion you and the Fantasy PT have in your overall approach to DFS? So what would you say is our biggest difference in terms of how we approach things? I'll just say I'm naturally more of a contrarian. So I like going against the grain more.
I was going to actually say that you generally are much more of a volume GPP player. I still play them, but like I build my bankroll each season by playing cash mostly. And I've had a couple really nice tournament weeks here and there, but like when I look back on the season for me as a player and how I play, I look back at how I did in cash, and that generally kind of tells me what my season was like. Whereas you know, you're definitely more that GPP life. You know, I know a couple years ago, I don't know if you're still this way, you were the 150 guy. You were running the optos, you were uploading your CSVs like a true DFS bro. That is not the life for me personally, but I respect that if that is your life.
I've definitely slowed down over, you know.
You've gotten more mature.
I've grown emotionally, but also it's just a lot to handle. I would say, so you're way better at Showdown than me. You've had more success, I would definitely say, Showdown. So I feel like I've learned a lot from that angle, because I used to just say, let me play a Showdown, let me put in 150 lineups. In one game, there's so much chaos, I'll just let it figure it out. And I've had some success, but I would say you are better at taking stances in Showdown. And writing that cash article has been super helpful for me to kind of understand the process and kind of actually get a view of like, here's how I do, and I'm accountable to it. But yes, I like being contrarian for the right reasons. Like I'm not just going to play stupid, but like if there's a popular running back, I will ask, what do I have to gain here? And I do like that. It's almost a better feeling for me, even if I don't win. If I just said I faded the chalk, like that's a really good feeling. So yeah, we're a little different than that. Next one from Jay Chris, one of our Discord mods. He said, how is dad life bets? Have you discovered your dad's superpower yet?
Dad life can be summed up basically in the start of the show with the car seat situation. It's chaos every day, but it's super fun. And, you know, as exhausting as it is, it's super rewarding. So it's been great. For my dad superpower, I never used to be someone that could just do stuff with one hand and not even think about it. But now, like, you're always holding something in one hand, whether it's the kid, the car seat, you know, diaper bag, whatever it is. So cooking breakfast, pouring coffee, making the bed, just whatever it is, one hand, way more efficient than I ever used to be in the past.
I would say my superpower as a dad is I'm pretty good at coming up with games on the fly or turning something into a game at any time, where I think it's easy for a kid if they, you know, want to do something and they don't get their expectation met, where I can just quickly flip this into, ooh, let's do this, or this is a fun game, and I actually get excited about playing these games too. So coming up with games on the fly is a really fun task, especially with two boys. So, yeah, you got to be real creative and on the fly and figure things out as a dad, because life doesn't go the way you plan because there's somebody else here now.
Learning this very quickly. Thank you.
Next one, at Brandon Hilliard on Twitter. Where do you prefer betting NFL futures? What's your preference on platform to use for in-season betting, and what type of bets do you tend to gravitate towards? I'll let you handle that one first.
Yeah, so, I mean, I generally would advise people, if you are trying to take this decently seriously, you should probably get some access to a couple different books, because the futures market is nuts. I mean, you can find a line to lead the league in passing, for example, with Justin Herbert this year. I took it on FanDuel, it was plus 800. Over on DraftKings, it was plus 500. I mean, that you never see that in like Chiefs -3. It's -3 everywhere, right? You don't get that sort of positive EV type of move in these these lines. In this sort of situation, you do. So if you're taking it seriously, you should probably have access to a couple different books. But I do a lot on DraftKings, a lot on FanDuel. Those are two easy ones, especially now that I'm in Pennsylvania where it's legal. So for me, that's kind of where I go. And then as far as my preference on what type of bets I like, I am not the lines and totals guy. It's such a hard game to beat. Player props is where it's at. We had a lot of fun doing that in the playoffs last year, and we're talking about adding a lot of that hopefully to our product this year. We'll see what happens. But I put out an article a couple weeks ago about season-long player props. Check that out. I'll keep adding to it each week. So those are definitely the softest markets.
I play on DraftKings Sportsbook the most, not just because they've been a sponsor, but I just find that it's pretty easy, pretty user-friendly, and it's really simple for us. Like when we post something as a company, just to all go in on that. For props, Underdog is great for over-under, but over-under is actually not the pick'em is not available in Arizona, so I could do that in Arizona, or in Atlanta, but I can't do that here. So that's kind of different. Prize picks, I think you and I would say, are easier to pick off lines. Like they're a little just softer in general, and their bonuses are really great. So I recommend Prize Picks, not a sponsor. Those are really fun. But in season, I would say one that I enjoy is if I'm gonna do Chiefs, Broncos, I'm going to figure out the team implied totals, because I think those are a little bit easier. Remember, there was that stretch where I was just like, bets. The Jaguars. Bet their under of their team implied total, because it happened like 14 weeks straight or whatever.
Yep, I remember that. That was fun.
Yep. And I will say, our company for like a Monday night game or Thursday night game for fun, we do like a really big parlay where everybody just goes in on it and nobody makes any money, but there's a lot of sweat and a lot of, I mean, there's been a couple times where like Mike has sweated out something where he's about to win $10,000 and somebody's like one reception short or something. Yep.
And to be clear, those are terrible bets. Like
yes.
If you're trying to take this seriously, do not do that. But they are a lot of fun, and like you said, they're a nice sweat.
I would say, like, think about this: you go out to eat with your friends, you go see a movie, a concert, whatever. You're paying $50 for one night, maybe more, $100, $200. So to watch a game with your friends and put down $10, $15 and you sweat it out, and like, I think that's not the worst way for someone to spend their money, but yes, we would agree from like a serious perspective, not the best way. All right. On Discord from Rainman1395, why is Fields not being prioritized by you guys like Lance? I'm extremely bullish on him and I have a ton of shares. Am I wrong? So I took this question a little bit personally, Betz, because I looked at my exposures. Do you want to know who my highest exposure quarterback is right now?
I'm going to guess it's Justin Fields.
It is Justin Fields. My highest exposure best ball quarterback right now, because it's probably going to be a quarterback that goes from that like 10 to 15 range, or maybe somebody else. Now, I have a bunch of teams that have Trey Lance that's going to push him over the edge over Fields, but I feel very comfortable. My top four quarterbacks, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, Trey Lance. That sounds like the most on-brand thing ever based on what we've talked about on this podcast.
I love it. Yeah, I love when the exposures line up. We're here, we're in this with you guys, and we're actually taking the players that we talk about. So it's good to see. As far as the question, like, I see the case for Fields. Don't get me wrong. If he comes out and runs for 800 yards, like, he's probably going to be a great fantasy quarterback, right? But I think when you talk about Lance and Fields, the argument from both of them is like the rushing upside is great. But the obvious thing is, like, who the heck is Justin Fields throwing the football to? N'Keal Harry? Velus Jones, I mean, it's going to be bad. And there is just more systemic risk in this team that it could go south super quick. Not that things can't go south with Lance, as we saw last year. But, if we look at Vegas lines, they're telling us this is still going to be a great team. I mean, their team total was at 10 and a half wins. And so the weapons are there. The coaching staff is there. There's just more that I think you feel more confident in. That said, if Justin Fields comes out and scores more fantasy points than Trey Lance, no one should be absolutely shocked by that by any means.
Yeah. And it comes down to, for me, I need to have rushing quarterbacks in this scoring format. I need to prioritize them. So I think Jalen Hurts is like my fifth most. Like I'm not personally bullish on Jalen Hurts as like a talent. Like I would love to fade the Eagles, not just for you, Betz, but just in the sense of like, and when a team is hyped like that, like your Eagles and your Lions are the two hyped teams. I would love to fade both those teams, but I recognize the upside with his rushing.
You're so wrong. It's not even funny.
I'm glad we're on the same page about the Ravens. I feel like we're on the same page about the Vikings.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's so easy to stack them too with their value outside of Justin Jefferson. I mean, it's a great team to get exposure to. We love all their pieces, especially when you talk about like, okay, you missed out on Dalvin. Grab Alexander Madison. Like, even if things don't go right for Dalvin, you're still going to have, we think, a great running back in Madison. And we love what Kirk Cousins can do as your quarterback too.
All right, let's do a couple more questions before wrap it around here. Just next one's from @RushQBsAreBroken on Twitter. It's a good question. I've heard the other ballers' stories, but how did you guys meet your wives? I love the show. So I'll let you go first, and I'll keep mine succinct too.
Sure, yeah. Very simple story, nothing crazy. We actually lived in the same dorm our freshman year of college, 2 floors apart. Let's just say she saw me moving in, and she couldn't pass. She couldn't pass on it. But the reality is, we actually were really good friends and part of the same friend group for about 1.5 to 2 years before I took the plunge. And I guess, as they say, the rest is history.
You guys went to Chili's, didn't you?
I mean, dude, we actually did a couple times.
We had a whole show about Chili's first dates, right? And how, statistically speaking, it's higher than you would think.
Oh yes, listeners, like what Kyle's referencing is, there's a good chance you listening to this show have taken a date to Chili's, and if you say that you haven't, you are definitely fooling yourself because it is an elite first place for a date.
I've definitely skewed some of the statistics in terms of my first dates and Chili's. I mean, it's a bar and grill. I mean, you get both. You get the best of both worlds. And I believe last time we talked about this, Chili's like added us on Twitter and tagged us, and we didn't get any gift cards though.
That was, what the heck is that? We just gave them free publicity. Couldn't even send us a free app, Come on.
I know. If Applebee's is listening, I won't eat there, but I'll take your gift cards. Let's just I'll turn that in. Mine is pretty simple too. We met in college, and we were part of the same friend group for 5 years before we ever started dating. And for some people, they're like, man, that took you a long time. We were good friends, and we kind of dated other people. But when I asked Emma out on a date, one of her best friends was one of her bridesmaids. She said, Kyle, like, don't be surprised if Emma doesn't like you. And I was just like, what? So
what are you supposed to do with that information?
I don't know. I was like, I asked her on a date, but Emma and I were so close that she didn't like fully realize it was a date. I said, hey, would you like to go to dinner with me on this night? And of course, at the Chili's, she said yes. Does that sound like a date to you?
It does to me, yes.
Thank you. Now, there's a much longer story, which I will not get here. Maybe it will make for a really good Twitter thread. But the time I realized that I loved my wife and that I wanted to marry her was when I walked on the side of the road for 3 days. And after the second day is when I found out, I think I love this woman. But it took me 3 days on the side of the road. I'm just going to leave it there. That makes me sound like a crazy person, doesn't it?
A little bit, yes.
Okay. I'm okay with that. I'll expand that story at another time. All right. One more question before we wrap around this one from @Mike Pellegrini. Great podcast and articles, guys. I've heard you talk about correlating week 17 matchups for best ball, but what about correlating divisions? In other words, let's say you think the AFC West will be the highest scoring division. Would you want players from all 4 teams on your roster? I'll first just say, you look at those 4 teams, right? Chiefs, Broncos, Chargers, Raiders. Those are some ADPs that are jacked up. Like, they're way up there. You're not going to be able to find, the discounts. I mean, there's players that, yes, Tim Patrick, Melvin Gordon, the Kansas City wide receivers, but for the most part, you can't just say, I want all the AFC West because everybody's priced up, right, in the first couple rounds. So how would you approach this, and are you thinking about building your rosters that way?
I mean, I'm not necessarily targeting certain divisions. I mean, there's definitely teams in certain divisions that we like a lot more, and this is the perfect example. So I'm targeting these teams not because of the division, but just because the quarterbacks, the players, that sort of thing. But what's funny about this question is that if you look at the Week 17 schedule, a lot of the matchups are divisional matchups. Not all of them, but there's definitely a bunch in there. Miami and New England play. We have the Vikings and the Packers playing. So there's a bunch of them in there just naturally. So, I'm not really factoring this in again. I'm just kind of correlating Week 17 with the matchups that are there, not necessarily divisions.
It's time for Rapid Round.
All right, we're going to blaze quickly through these last couple of ones from Connor Scott. If there was a player you could remove from best ball because you don't want to draft him for health reasons, current situation, but you also don't want someone else to draft him, who would it be, Betz?
I'm just scared to be wrong about Michael Thomas. I mean, there's a lot. It's just a wide range of outcomes. Like he's been so productive. He's been so good, but this injury, it's been so long. It's a new quarterback. It's a new scheme. I haven't taken a lot of him, and I'm just terrified to be wrong.
I'm the same way. I kind of do want people to take him and me just be right about Chris Olave. That would make me feel even smarter. But my answer is DeAndre Hopkins. I haven't been taking him. The reason you would take him is you say he comes back and he's a top, 8, 10 wide receiver, and he just balls out in the playoffs. I'm terrified of the outcomes. I haven't been taking him, and I hope he doesn't go off for other people. Like, that would just ruin me from an exposure standpoint. Next one from Cashes89. Is it worth taking Jimmy G super late in drafts based on the possibility he goes to the Seahawks or wherever? And how would this change your outlook on a team like Seattle?
I just need to give a little insight here. You were in the doc before me this morning or yesterday, it looks like. And I log in and I see this question. Kyle just literally writes, nope, period. I will give you a little bit more analysis behind this. The reality is, if you're taking Jimmy G and you're thinking about it, that he goes to the Seahawks, I mean, do you want Jimmy G on a run-first team where he is going there to hand the ball off over and over again just to hope that he hits in the fantasy playoffs? I mean, historically, his QB1 percentage is super, super low. Going back to 2018, he started 39 games. He's finished as a QB1, aka top 12, just 9 times. That's just over 20%. I will fade that and hope that he doesn't have that. And if he does, great, and I'll be willing to take the L.
It's really hard to take players on the hope that maybe they go to this other team in best ball, and I get you're trying to get ahead of the curve. That's what you did with Baker Mayfield. And with Baker, it moved him up from, in my mind, QB 27 to QB 23 or 4. It's not a huge needle mover. It more helps the other weapons there. So I guess you could talk yourself into Seattle weapons a little bit. But yeah, I don't want any Jimmy G. Doesn't run the ball. In a 4-point passing is just there's not an upside. And he doesn't get passing yard bonuses. Just for me, no thank you. From Real Blaze Swift, peanut M&Ms or regular M&Ms?
Oh, easy. Peanut every time. Peanut butter is one of my weaknesses, I'll say, when it comes to food. Love it. And I'll take the peanut M&Ms over the regular every day.
My answer is no, neither. Don't like them. Don't care about M&Ms. They don't matter to me. I haven't eaten them since I was, 6. I tried them, didn't like them. And
you a Skittles guy?
I don't even eat Skittles. I could eat Starburst all day. I could eat Favorite Red Starburst, and I could eat Sour Starburst. But M&Ms, they will probably never touch my lips the rest of my life.
What a quote.
I know. They will never touch my lips. Because that's how you eat them. You just put them on your lips, right?
Yep.
It's just what you do. All right, last one on Discord. Do you ever grab a player based on ADP? Basically, it is a screaming value, but you really don't need that position.
Yes, when someone falls just a ridiculous amount of spots past where they're going. This actually happened to me the other day. I think it was Jalen Hurts, and then Tom Brady fell about 25 spots after ADP. I wasn't planning to go quarterback in that range, but if you're going to give me Tom Brady a couple rounds after where he normally goes, because I'm already bullish on Tom Brady, I'm going to take Tom Brady as my quarterback too. So that's one example. But yes, if there is a screaming value, I will go for it, because historically, best ball advance rates have shown if you are taking players past their ADP when they fall, generally that is a great pick.
Yeah, I did that with Pat Freiermuth where I just hadn't been taking him and we've been down. He's actually on our bust list in the UDK. And his ADP and Underdog is just still sitting, tight end 12? He just hasn't moved.
It's 125 or something like that.
He's just in a spot where I'm just never thinking to take him. He fell 3.5 rounds. So he just kept sitting there, and I had a build where I was going to take 3 tight ends. So at this point, I said, that's totally fine. And I believe I had Lamar on that team. So Ravens, Steelers, week 17, I said, hey, this is going to give me a different lineup construction than I think a lot of other people. I did take one the other day that I've been taking no J.K. Dobbins. I've been taking your medical advice, but he did fall a full 3 rounds. So am I a fool of taking him as my RB3?
I mean, what's so wild about injury analysis is that people usually don't understand. There's the cost is so important of what you're talking about. And this year, I'm super bullish on Saquon. Last year, when he was going at pick 12, what he has to do compared to where he was going early in the offseason in the 3rd round is so different. Give me all the risk in round 3. And, J.K. Dobbins, I do think starts out either on PUP or very, very slow. I know he kind of dunked on Rap Sheet for that, but we'll see it. We have plenty of time to figure out what's going on. But if you take him 3 rounds past where his ADP is, he's not supposed to do what he's supposed to do for you if you take him in round 5. And so if he starts out on PUP or very slow, yeah, give me J.K. Dobbins in round 8 if he gives you 5 RB1 weeks across the final 8 or 9 games. That is definitely in the range of outcomes. So if he falls far enough, I'll even take him too.
That's going to wrap up our mailbag episode, Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Once again, if you want to reach out to Betz or I, we are friendly folk on Twitter. We're not mean in the streets, but if you want to face us in the lobby, in the Underdog lobby, or Betz in the DK lobby when it's season.
Now it's on. It's on.
That's when it's rough. But yeah, if you want to get all of our content, you go to fantasyfootballers.com and get the Ultimate Draft Kit Plus with the DFS Pass. We are releasing right now, starting in August, some DFS strategy pieces that we think will help you take down some tournaments. So make sure you check that out at ultimatedraftkit.com. Betz, sign us off.
For M&Ms, for Chili's, for first dates everywhere, and for a great show. Have a great weekend. Mow your lawn. We will see you in the Underdog lobby, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Fantasy Footballers DFS Podcast. Don't forget to visit us on the web at www.thefantasyfootballers.com.